Never judge someone by their empty pockets, because the person you look down on today might be signing your paycheck tomorrow. This is a story of Desmond, a man who learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what truly matters. In the bustling city of Lagos, where concrete towers stretched toward the heavens and money flowed like rivers through the streets, lived a young man named Desmond. He was 25 years old, with callous hands that spoke of honest work and eyes that held dreams bigger than his bank account. Every morning, Desmond would wake up in his tiny one-room apartment, the kind where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms wide enough. The walls were painted a faded yellow that had seen better days, and the single window looked out onto a narrow alley where stray cats searched for scraps and children played with makeshift toys carved from discarded plastic bottles and empty cans. The apartment was barely furnished with essentials that Desmond had saved up for over many months. A single bed with a thin mattress that sagged in the middle, a wooden table he had built himself from leftover construction materials, and a small gas burner that served as his kitchen. The bathroom was shared with 3 other tenants, and hot water was a luxury he couldn't afford. But despite these humble conditions, Desmond kept the space clean and organized. His engineering textbooks were neatly stacked on a makeshift shelf, and his few clothes were always washed and pressed, even if they showed signs of wear and countless repairs. Desmond worked as a construction laborer, carrying heavy bags of cement and steel rods under the scorching Nigerian sun. His muscles ached every night, but his spirit remained unbroken. He had graduated from the University of Lagos with a degree in civil engineering, finishing with honors despite working part-time jobs throughout his studies to pay for his education. His mother had sold her small plot of land in their village to help him through university, and his father had worked double shifts as a security guard to contribute to the fees. The weight of their sacrifice pushed him forward every day, even when the rejections from engineering firms piled up like autumn leaves. Jobs were scarce for fresh graduates without connections, and bills needed to be paid. So Desmond took what work he could find, always believing that better days were coming. His toolbox contained not just hammers and measuring tapes, but also carefully folded copies of his certificates, sealed in plastic bags to protect them from dust and moisture. Inside a worn notebook, he kept sketches of buildings he dreamed of designing one day, architectural marvels that would change skylines and improve people's lives. The other workers often laughed at Desmond's ambitions. They would point at his worn-out shoes with holes in the soles that he had covered with duct tape, and his faded work clothes that had been mended so many times they looked like patchwork quilts. During lunch breaks, while others played cards or gossiped about football matches, Desmond would study architectural magazines he borrowed from the public library. He memorized the works of great architects, analyzed building techniques, and dreamed of the day when his designs would grace the pages of those same magazines. But Desmond never let their mockery dim his determination. He understood that success wasn't about where you started, but about how far you were willing to climb. Every morning, he would look at himself in the cracked mirror of the shared bathroom and remind himself that temporary circumstances didn't define permanent character. He had seen wealthy men's sons squander fortunes through laziness and poor decisions, while he had also witnessed ordinary people rise to extraordinary heights through persistence and hard work. His best friend Joseph, who worked alongside him on a construction site, often marveled at Desmond's unwavering optimism. Joseph had grown up in similar circumstances, but unlike Desmond, he had accepted his lot in life and harbored no grand ambitions beyond earning enough to feed his family. He would watch Desmond sketching building designs during their 30-minute lunch breaks and shake his head in amazement. It was on a particularly hot Tuesday afternoon in the month of March that Desmond first laid eyes on Gloria. The sun was beating down mercilessly, and construction workers were taking turns pouring water over their heads to cool down. Sweat dripped from every surface, and the smell of hot concrete and metal filled the air like a thick blanket. Desmond was operating a cement mixer, his shirt soaked through with perspiration, when a familiar sound of expensive car engines approached the site entrance. She stepped out of a sleek black Mercedes-Benz that gleamed like polished obsidian under the harsh sunlight. The car was so clean it seemed to repel dust, and the chrome details sparkled like diamonds. Her high heels clicked against the pavement like a rhythm that announced her importance to everyone within earshot. Gloria was a daughter of Chief Emeka Okafor, one of the wealthiest construction magnates in the entire West African region. Her father's company, Okafor Construction Limited, had built half the skyscrapers that dotted the Lagos skyline, including the famous 40-story Okafor Towers that serve as the headquarters for multiple international corporations. Gloria herself was 23, with skin that glowed like polished bronze and hair that cascaded down her shoulders in perfectly styled waves that moved like silk in the slight breeze. She wore a white designer dress that probably cost more than Desmond made in 3 months, and gold jewelry that caught the sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes that could be seen from across a construction site. Her handbag was crafted from genuine Italian leather, and her sunglasses bore the logo of a French fashion house that only the ultra-wealthy could afford. She had come to the construction site where Desmond worked because her father was conducting his monthly inspection of the progress on a new shopping complex they were building. Chief Okafor was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his habit of making surprise visits to ensure that his projects met his exacting standards. As Gloria walked to the site beside her father, her designer shoes somehow managing to navigate the rough terrain without collecting dust, her eyes swept over the workers with the casual indifference that comes from a lifetime of privilege. Most of the laborers stopped their work when she passed, partly out of respect for the boss's daughter, and partly because her beauty was the kind that made men pause and stare. She was accustomed to such attention, and barely noticed it anymore. Her world was filled with admirers who saw only her father's wealth and her own physical beauty, treating her like a precious ornament to be admired from a distance. But when her gaze fell on Desmond, something shifted in the atmosphere around them. Perhaps it was the way he carried himself with quiet dignity despite his humble circumstances, standing straight and proud even while covered in concrete dust and sweat. Or maybe it was the intelligent spark in his eyes that seemed to see beyond the present moment into a future full of infinite possibilities. Unlike the other workers who either stared openly or looked away in intimidation, Desmond met her gaze with neither fear nor arrogance, but with a calm confidence that intrigued her.
Desmond was mixing concrete when he noticed her looking at him. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, their eyes met across the dusty construction site, and the world around them seemed to pause. The noise of machinery faded into the background like distant thunder, and the shouting of foremen became whispers carried away by the wind. Gloria felt her heart skip in a way that expensive jewelry and designer clothes had never made it skip before. There was something about this young man that cut through all the superficiality she was used to, something genuine and real in a world where she was constantly surrounded by people who only showed her what they thought she wanted to see. Over the following weeks, Gloria found herself making excuses to visit the construction site with increasing frequency. She would tell her father she was interested in learning about the family business, expressing a sudden curiosity about construction processes and project management that surprised Chief Okafor. In truth, she was drawn by the magnetic pull of Desmond's presence like a moth to a flame. Her father, pleased by what he perceived as his daughter's newfound interest in the company that would one day be hers, encouraged these visits and even assigned her small tasks to make her feel involved. During these visits, Gloria began to notice things about Desmond that others completely overlooked or dismissed. She observed the way he helped younger workers learn their tasks with endless patience and genuine kindness, never making them feel stupid for asking questions or making mistakes. She watched how he never complained even when supervisors treated him unfairly, assigning him the heaviest loads or the most dangerous tasks simply because they knew he wouldn't protest. She noticed the careful way he studied architectural plans during his brief lunch breaks, as if he were memorizing every line, angle, and dimension with the dedication of a scholar studying sacred texts. What struck her most was his unwavering professionalism. While other workers would sometimes slack off when supervisors weren't watching, or cut corners to make their jobs easier, Desmond maintained the same high standards whether he was being observed or not. He treated every task, no matter how menial, as if it were the most important job in the world. When mixing concrete, he ensured the proportions were perfect. When carrying materials, he organized them systematically for maximum efficiency. When cleaning up at the end of the day, he left his work area spotless. Desmond, for his part, was both flattered and bewildered by Gloria's attention. He had never imagined that someone from her world would notice someone from his, let alone show genuine interest in his thoughts and dreams. The first time she approached him to ask about his work, he stammered through his responses, acutely aware of the dirt under his fingernails and the sweat stains that marked his shirt like badges of honest labor. His voice cracked slightly as he tried to explain the technical aspects of what he was doing, worried that his explanations might sound too simple or too complex for someone of her background. But Gloria seemed genuinely fascinated by everything he told her. She asked thoughtful questions about construction techniques, about the challenges of building in Lagos's climate, about his educational background and his future aspirations. Her questions weren't the polite, superficial inquiries that rich people sometimes made to seem interested in ordinary folks. These were real questions from someone who truly wanted to understand his world and his perspective. Their conversations began as brief exchanges during work breaks but gradually grew longer and more meaningful with each passing day. Gloria would arrive at the site earlier than necessary and linger after her father had finished his inspections, finding reasons to walk past Desmond's work area. She began bringing him cold drinks on particularly hot days, expensive bottled water, and imported soft drinks that cost more than his daily wages. Desmond would share his sketches and ideas with her, pulling out his worn notebook with hands that trembled slightly from nervousness and excitement. Gloria was absolutely amazed by his creativity and vision. The sketches in his notebook weren't just technical drawings, but artistic representations of architectural dreams that took her breath away. He could look at an empty lot and describe in vivid, almost poetic detail the magnificent structure he imagined rising from it. He spoke of buildings that would not just shelter people, but inspire them to reach for greatness, structures that would stand as monuments to human ambition and ingenuity while serving the practical needs of their communities. One afternoon, as they sat in the shade of a construction crane during the lunch break, Desmond showed her a particularly elaborate sketch of a residential complex designed for low-income families. The drawing showed not just buildings, but entire communities with playgrounds, gardens, small business spaces, and educational facilities integrated into the design. He explained how proper architecture could transform not just individual lives, but entire neighborhoods and generations of families. As the days turned into weeks, an unlikely romance began to bloom between them like a flower growing through concrete. It was a love that defied all logic and social expectations, a connection that attempted to bridge two vastly different worlds separated by money, class, and social standing. Gloria began to see past Desmond's humble circumstances to discover the brilliant mind and noble heart that beat beneath his worn work clothes. She realized that despite all her advantages and privileges, she had never met anyone with such depth of character and strength of spirit. And Desmond, despite his initial intimidation and self-doubt, began to believe that perhaps love truly could conquer all obstacles. He started to see himself through Gloria's eyes and discovered qualities he had never recognized before. Her admiration gave him confidence, and her genuine interest in his dreams made those dreams seem more achievable than ever before. Their secret meetings became the highlight of both their days. They would find quiet corners of the construction site where they could talk without interruption, sharing stories about their childhoods, their hopes, their fears, and their dreams for the future. Gloria told him about the loneliness of growing up wealthy, how people always wanted something from her family, how hard it was to know who truly cared about her versus who was just interested in her father's money and connections. She described the pressure of always having to look perfect, act perfect, and represent the family name with dignity. Desmond shared his own struggles, the weight of his family's sacrifices, the daily humiliation of being looked down upon despite his education and abilities. He told her about nights when he went to bed hungry to save money for books, about walking for hours to avoid spending money on transport, about the crushing disappointment of job rejection after job rejection. But he also shared his unshakable faith that things would improve, his belief that hard work and integrity would eventually be rewarded. As their relationship deepened, they began to meet outside the construction site. Gloria would pick him up in her car after work, and they would drive to quiet places where they could be alone together. They went to beaches where they walked along the shore at sunset, talking about everything and nothing while the waves crashed at their feet. They visited museums where Desmond's knowledge of architecture and engineering impressed even the tour guides. They sat in small restaurants where Gloria experienced simple, delicious food she had never tasted before, Meals that cost a fraction of what she usually spent on dinner but somehow tasted better than the finest cuisine her father's chefs prepared. These experiences opened Gloria's eyes to a completely different way of living. She began to understand that happiness didn't necessarily correlate with the amount of money in one's bank account. She saw how Desmond could find joy in simple pleasures, how he appreciated small kindnesses, how he never took anything for granted. His gratitude for basic things made her realize how much she had been taking for granted her entire life. But their romance was not without its challenges and complications. The social divide between them created constant tension and awkward situations. When Gloria's friends saw her with Desmond, they reacted with confusion, shock, and sometimes barely concealed disgust. They couldn't understand what someone of her status could possibly see in a common laborer. Some of her wealthy friends whispered behind her back, suggesting she was going through a rebellious phase or seeking attention through scandalous behavior. Similarly, Desmond faced skepticism and warnings from his own friends and family members. Joseph, his closest friend, worried that Desmond was setting himself up for heartbreak by getting involved with someone so far above his social station. Other workers at the construction site made crude jokes about his relationship, suggesting that Gloria was simply amusing herself with a poor man and would eventually return to her own world, leaving him behind with a broken heart and shattered dreams. Despite these external pressures and internal doubts, their love continued to grow stronger with each passing day. They began to talk seriously about a future together, about the possibility of marriage, and building a life that would combine his determination and her resources to create something beautiful and meaningful. Gloria started to envision a life where she could use her family's wealth and connections to help Desmond establish himself as an architect and engineer, where they could work together to build not just buildings, but better communities for people who needed decent, affordable housing. Desmond, meanwhile, began to dream of a partnership where his skills and vision could be enhanced by Gloria's business acumen and social connections. He imagined founding a construction company that would specialize in affordable housing projects, creating beautiful, functional homes for working-class families while still maintaining profitability and growth. Their secret romance reached a turning point when Gloria made a decision that would change both their lives forever. One evening, as the sun painted the Lagos sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Gloria made a decision that would shock everyone who knew her. She had been thinking about it for weeks, weighing the consequences and considering all the possible outcomes. But her heart had made the choice long before her mind caught up. She was going to tell her father about Desmond, and she was going to ask for his blessing to marry the man she loved. Chief Emeka Okafor was in his study when Gloria knocked on the heavy wooden door. The room was a testament to his success, with walls lined with awards, photographs of him shaking hands with presidents and governors, and certificates of honor from various business organizations. His massive mahogany desk was covered with contracts and financial reports, and the air smelled of expensive cigars and imported whiskey. When Gloria entered, he looked up from his papers with the indulgent smile he always wore when looking at his precious daughter. But that smile faded quickly when Gloria began to speak. She told him about Desmond, about their relationship, about her intention to marry him despite his humble background. She spoke passionately about Desmond's character, his intelligence, his work ethic, and his potential for success. She described his architectural visions and his dreams of building better communities for ordinary people. She begged her father to look beyond Desmond's current circumstances and see the man he truly was and could become. Chief Okafor listened in stunned silence, his face growing darker with each word his daughter spoke. When she finished, he remained quiet for several long moments that stretched like hours. Then, slowly and deliberately, he stood up from his chair and walked to the window that overlooked his sprawling estate. His voice, when he finally spoke, was cold and measured, carrying a tone Gloria had never heard before. He told her she was being foolish and naive, that she was confusing temporary infatuation with genuine love. He explained that marriage was not just about feelings, but about social compatibility, shared backgrounds, and practical considerations. He pointed out that Desmond could never provide for her in the manner she deserved, could never give her the lifestyle she had grown up with, could never fit into their social circles or understand their way of life. But Gloria stood her ground with a determination that surprised even herself. She argued that true love was more valuable than social status, that she would rather be happy with a poor man than miserable with a wealthy one. She reminded her father that he himself had started with very little and built his empire through hard work and determination, the same qualities she saw in Desmond. She pleaded with him to give Desmond a chance, to meet him properly and judge him fairly. The argument escalated quickly, with both father and daughter raising their voices for the first time in their relationship. Chief Okafor accused Gloria of being willing to throw away her family's reputation for a momentary passion. Gloria accused her father of being a snob who had forgotten his own humble beginnings. The confrontation ended with Chief Okafor forbidding Gloria from seeing Desmond again and threatening severe consequences if she disobeyed him. But love, as they say, finds a way around even the highest walls and strictest rules. Gloria continued to meet Desmond in secret, now with even more intensity because of the forbidden nature of their relationship. They would rendezvous in hidden locations, communicate through coded messages, and steal precious moments together whenever possible. The danger and secrecy only seemed to strengthen their bond and deepen their commitment to each other. After months of secret meetings and growing frustration with her father's stubborn opposition, Gloria made another bold decision. If her father wouldn't give his blessing to their relationship, she would take matters into her own hands. On a warm Saturday morning, she and Desmond went to the local registry office and got married in a simple civil ceremony with only Joseph and one of Gloria's loyal house servants as witnesses. The wedding was nothing like the elaborate celebration Gloria had always imagined for herself. There were no hundreds of guests, no designer wedding dress, no orchestra or expensive flowers. Instead, Gloria wore a simple white dress she had bought at a local market, and Desmond wore his one good suit that he had saved for special occasions. But as they exchanged vows in that small government office, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the sound of traffic filtering through thin windows, they both felt they were participating in something more meaningful than any grand ceremony could have provided. When Chief Okafor discovered what his daughter had done, his rage was like a volcanic eruption that shook the very foundations of their family. He immediately disowned Gloria, cutting off her access to the family money and removing her name from all business documents and inheritance papers. He declared that she was no longer his daughter and that she was not welcome in his house or at any family gatherings. He told his friends and business associates that Gloria had made her choice and would have to live with the consequences. But Gloria, intoxicated by love and youthful optimism, believed that everything would work out perfectly. She moved into Desmond's tiny apartment, bringing with her only the clothes she could carry and a small amount of money she had managed to save from her personal allowance. She was confident that her father would eventually come around and accept Desmond once he saw how happy they were together. She also believed that Desmond's talent and determination would quickly lead to success and financial stability. The reality of married life hit them both like a cold wave on a hot day. Gloria had never lived without servants, air conditioning, hot water on demand, or 3 elaborate meals prepared by professional cooks. The tiny apartment that had seemed quaint and romantic during their courtship now felt cramped and suffocating. The shared bathroom down the hall, which she had thought was charmingly bohemian, became a source of daily frustration and embarrassment. The simple meals that Desmond prepared on his single gas burner, which had once seemed so authentic and down-to-earth, began to taste bland and repetitive. Meanwhile, Desmond threw himself into the task of building a better life for his new wife with the same determination he had always shown in his work. He spent every free moment networking with other engineers, submitting proposals for building contracts, and trying to establish himself as an independent contractor rather than just a laborer. He would wake up before dawn to work on project proposals, spend his days on construction sites, and stay up late into the night studying architectural journals and preparing bids for new contracts. But the construction industry in Lagos was notoriously difficult to break into for someone without connections or capital. Contracts were often awarded based on who you knew rather than what you could do. Established companies had relationships with government officials and private developers that stretched back decades. Banks were reluctant to lend money to young entrepreneurs without collateral or family guarantees. Every door that Desmond knocked on seemed to open, just wide enough for him to glimpse the opportunities inside before slamming shut in his face. Week after week, month after month, Desmond's carefully prepared proposals were rejected with form letters that offered no explanation or feedback. Potential clients would express initial interest in his ideas, arrange meetings, listen politely to his presentations, and then choose more established firms for their projects. The few small jobs he managed to secure barely cover their basic living expenses, leaving nothing for investment in better equipment, advertising, or business development. As the rejections piled up and their financial situation became increasingly desperate, the strain began to show in their marriage. Gloria, who had never experienced want or uncertainty in her life, found herself growing increasingly anxious and frustrated with their circumstances. She had expected that Desmond's talent would quickly translate into success and recognition, but instead she watched him struggle with mounting discouragement and dwindling opportunities. The woman who had once admired Desmond's optimism and determination began to see these same qualities as naive stubbornness. She started to question whether he was really as brilliant as she had believed, or whether she had been blinded by romantic feelings and youthful idealism. The man who had seemed so confident and capable when she was living in comfort now appeared to be just another struggling dreamer among thousands in the city. Their conversations, which had once been filled with shared dreams and mutual encouragement, gradually became dominated by discussions about unpaid bills, failed contract bids, and the growing list of things they couldn't afford. Gloria found herself comparing their current situation to the comfortable life she had given up, mentally calculating how much money they were spending on basic necessities that she had previously taken for granted. The transformation in Gloria's attitude was gradual but unmistakable. She began to make small comments about Desmond's failures, suggestions that perhaps he wasn't trying hard enough or approaching potential clients in the right way. She started to express regret about the life she had left behind, mentioning the opportunities and comfort she had sacrificed for their relationship. Her tone when speaking to him shifted from supportive and loving to critical and impatient. Desmond, already struggling with the constant rejection and financial pressure, found his wife's growing dissatisfaction to be the heaviest burden of all. The woman who had once believed in his dreams more than he believed in them himself was now looking at him with disappointment and doubt in her eyes. The love that had given him strength to face any challenge was slowly transforming into a source of shame and inadequacy. As their second year of marriage began, the fairy tale romance that had defied social expectations and family opposition was crumbling under the weight of harsh reality and unfulfilled expectations. The deterioration of their marriage accelerated like a car rolling down a steep hill with broken brakes. What had started as occasional complaints and subtle criticisms evolved into daily arguments and open contempt. Gloria's patience, which had already been wearing thin, finally snapped completely during one particularly difficult week when Desmond lost out on 3 different contracts he had been counting on to improve their financial situation. The first contract was for a small residential building that would have provided steady income for several months. Desmond had spent weeks preparing his proposal, creating detailed blueprints and cost estimates that demonstrated both his technical skill and his understanding of budget constraints. But the client chose a larger firm with an established track record, explaining that they couldn't take risks on someone without extensive experience, regardless of how impressive his proposals might be. The second contract was for renovating an office building, a project that seemed perfect for someone with Desmond's combination of engineering knowledge and hands-on construction experience. He had presented innovative solutions for maximizing space while minimizing costs, ideas that had clearly impressed the building owner during their initial meeting. But once again, established connections trumped creative solutions, and the contract went to a company that had been working with the client's family for over 2 decades. The third and most devastating rejection came from a government housing project that Desmond had seen as his big breakthrough opportunity. He had spent months researching the requirements, consulting with community leaders to understand the real needs of potential residents, and developing designs that would provide maximum functionality at minimum cost. His presentation had been flawless, his proposals innovative, and his passion for the project evident to everyone in the room. But the contract was awarded to a firm owned by the cousin of a government official, despite their higher costs and inferior design concepts. When Desmond came home that evening after receiving the third rejection, he found Gloria sitting at their small table with bills spread out in front of her like accusatory documents in a courtroom. The electricity bill was 2 months overdue, the rent was due the following week, and they had barely enough money for food to last the rest of the month. The weight of their circumstances hung in the air between them like a thick fog that made it hard to breathe. Gloria looked up at him with eyes that had once sparkled with love and admiration, but now held only disappointment and growing resentment. When he told her about the latest rejection, something inside her finally broke. The words that came out of her mouth were like knives designed to cut as deeply as possible. She told him that maybe the problem wasn't just bad luck or unfair competition. Maybe the problem was that he simply wasn't as talented or capable as they had both believed. She said that perhaps all those established companies and experienced contractors knew something that she had been too blind to see. Maybe Desmond was just a dreamer with no real ability to turn his dreams into reality. Maybe she had been foolish to believe that love and optimism could overcome the practical realities of business and social class. Maybe her father had been right all along when he warned her that Desmond could never provide for her or give her the life she deserved. These words hit Desmond like physical blows, each one landing with the force of a hammer against his chest. The woman he loved more than his own life was echoing every doubt and fear that had been growing in his own mind during the long months of failure and rejection. But hearing these thoughts spoken aloud by Gloria made them seem not just possible but inevitable and true. The argument that followed was unlike anything they had experienced before. Voices were raised, accusations were thrown like weapons, and years of suppressed frustrations were unleashed in a torrent of anger and hurt feelings. Gloria accused Desmond of being too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to consider other career options, and too naive to understand how the real world actually worked. She said that while he was chasing impossible dreams, she was the one dealing with the practical consequences of their poverty and social isolation. Desmond, wounded and defensive, accused Gloria of being spoiled and ungrateful, of never really understanding what it meant to struggle or work for something. He said that she had expected marriage to be like a fairy tale where everything worked out perfectly without effort or sacrifice. He pointed out that she had never truly committed to their life together, that she was always comparing their situation to the comfort she had left behind instead of appreciating the love and partnership they shared. The fight ended with both of them saying things they immediately regretted but couldn't take back. Gloria stormed out of the apartment, returning to spend the night with one of her few remaining friends who hadn't completely cut ties with her after her marriage. Desmond was left alone in the tiny apartment that suddenly felt even smaller and more suffocating than ever before. As the months passed, their relationship continued to deteriorate at an alarming pace. Gloria's complaints became constant and increasingly cruel. She would make cutting remarks about Desmond's appearance, criticizing his worn clothing and suggesting that his shabby appearance was part of the reason why potential clients didn't take him seriously. She complained about the food they ate, the places they lived, the friends they associated with, and the entertainment they could afford. More damaging than her complaints about their circumstances were her attacks on Desmond's character and abilities. She began to suggest that maybe he wasn't really cut out for entrepreneurship, that perhaps he should give up his dreams of being an independent contractor and accept a regular job with a steady salary. She said that his pride was keeping them poor, that he was being selfish by pursuing his ambitions at the expense of their financial security and her happiness. But Gloria's cruelest weapon was comparison. She would tell Desmond stories about her former classmates and friends, describing the successful careers, comfortable homes, and luxurious lifestyles they were enjoying while she was stuck in poverty. She would mention the men who had tried to court her before she met Desmond, successful businessmen, and professionals who could have provided her with everything she was now lacking. These comparisons were designed to make Desmond feel inadequate and guilty, and they achieved their intended effect with devastating precision. The emotional abuse escalated when Gloria began to publicly humiliate Desmond in front of others. When they attended social gatherings or family events with his relatives, she would make snide comments about their financial situation or Desmond's lack of success. She would tell embarrassing stories about their living conditions or failed business ventures, always framing herself as the long-suffering victim of Desmond's incompetence and stubbornness. Joseph, Desmond's loyal friend, watched this transformation with growing alarm and anger. He could see how Gloria's constant criticism was destroying Desmond's confidence and self-esteem. The man who had once faced every challenge with optimism and determination was becoming withdrawn, anxious, and increasingly doubtful of his own abilities. Joseph tried to talk to his friend about the situation, suggesting that perhaps the problem wasn't with Desmond's capabilities, but with Gloria's unrealistic expectations and cruel treatment. But Desmond, still desperately in love despite everything that had happened, defended Gloria's behavior and made excuses for her cruelty. He said that she was just frustrated and disappointed, that she had sacrificed everything for their marriage and deserved better than what he was providing. He convinced himself that if he could just find success and financial stability, Gloria would return to being the loving, supportive woman he had married. This self-blame and acceptance of Gloria's abuse created a vicious cycle that trapped them both in an increasingly toxic relationship. The more Desmond blamed himself for their problems, the more Gloria felt justified in treating him badly. The more she criticized and belittled him, the more his confidence eroded, and the harder it became for him to perform well in job interviews or business meetings. The worse he performed, the more ammunition Gloria had for her attacks on his character and abilities. The situation reached a new low when Gloria began to threaten divorce on a regular basis. She would say that she had made a terrible mistake marrying him, that she could still return to her old life if she acted quickly enough. She claimed that her father might be willing to forgive her if she divorced Desmond, and proved that she had learned from her mistakes. These threats were like daggers to Desmond's heart, combining his fear of losing the woman he loved with his terror of being seen as a complete failure who couldn't even keep his marriage together. But Gloria wasn't finished with her destruction of their relationship. In a moment of desperation and rage, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever and in ways neither of them could have imagined. She decided to escalate her emotional warfare by involving outside authorities in their domestic conflicts, using a weapon that would not only destroy their marriage but potentially destroy Desmond's life entirely. The trap she was about to set would combine her family's wealth and influence with the power of the legal system to create a situation from which Desmond would have no escape and no defense. It was a betrayal so complete and devastating that it would leave scars that would last far longer than their marriage ever had. On a rainy Thursday evening that would forever be etched in Desmond's memory, Gloria executed her final and most devastating attack. She had spent days planning every detail, consulting with lawyers her father had recommended, and preparing a story that would destroy not just their marriage, but potentially Desmond's entire future. When he arrived home from another unsuccessful day of job hunting, soaked from the rain and exhausted from walking because they couldn't afford taxi fare, he found Gloria sitting calmly at their small table with an expression he had never seen before. Without any warning or explanation, Gloria began to scream at the top of her lungs, shouting accusations of physical abuse that echoed through their thin apartment walls and into the neighboring units. She claimed that Desmond had been beating her for months, that she had been living in fear, that she couldn't take the violence anymore. Her performance was so convincing that even Desmond, who knew none of it was true, began to doubt his own memory for a moment. Before he could process what was happening or respond to her accusations, the door burst open and several uniformed security officers employed by her father's company stormed into the apartment. Chief Okafor had positioned these men nearby, waiting for Gloria's signal to intervene in what would appear to be a domestic violence situation. The officers, who had been told they were rescuing an abused woman from a dangerous husband, showed no mercy or hesitation in their actions. They grabbed Desmond with brutal efficiency, ignoring his confused protests and desperate attempts to explain that nothing Gloria was claiming had actually happened. When he tried to speak, they struck him across the mouth, telling him to shut up and stop making excuses for his crimes against his wife. When he attempted to break free from their grip to approach Gloria and ask her why she was doing this, they interpreted his movement as aggressive behavior and responded with overwhelming violence. The beating that followed was systematic and thorough, designed to cause maximum pain while avoiding injuries that might prove fatal. They used batons to strike his ribs and back, leaving bruises that would last for weeks. They kicked him repeatedly in the stomach and legs until he could no longer stand upright. They slammed his head against the wall hard enough to leave him dizzy and disoriented but not unconscious. Throughout the assault, Gloria watched with cold satisfaction, occasionally offering comments about how he deserved everything he was getting for the way he had supposedly treated her. When the security officers finally stopped beating him, Desmond was barely conscious and bleeding from multiple wounds. His left eye was swollen shut, his lip was split open, and several of his ribs were cracked or broken. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of watching the woman he loved orchestrate his destruction with such calculated cruelty. The officers dragged him from the apartment and threw him into the back of their van like a sack of garbage. As they drove through the dark streets of Lagos toward a private detention facility owned by Chief Okafor's company, Desmond drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind struggling to understand how his life had collapsed so completely and so suddenly. The woman who had once told him she would love him forever had just destroyed him with a lie so vicious that it made all her previous cruelty seem like gentle teasing. He was held in the detention facility for 3 days without access to a lawyer, medical attention, or contact with the outside world. The guards, who had been told he was a wife-beater, treated him with contempt and disgust. They gave him minimal food and water, ignored his requests for medical treatment for his injuries, and subjected him to additional beatings whenever he tried to ask questions about his situation or demand his legal rights. During those 3 days, Gloria was busy completing the next phase of her plan. She filed for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting an emergency restraining order based on her false claims of domestic violence. Her father's lawyers had prepared all the necessary paperwork in advance, and the court, presented with what appeared to be evidence of serious abuse, granted her request without requiring Desmond to be present or represented. When Desmond was finally released from detention, he discovered that he had lost everything. The divorce papers were waiting for him when he returned to what had been their apartment, along with an eviction notice and a restraining order that prohibited him from coming within 500 meters of Gloria or any property owned by her father's company. His few possessions had been thrown into garbage bags and left on the street, where most of them had been stolen or destroyed by the rain. More devastating than the loss of his possessions was the damage to his reputation. Word of Gloria's accusations had spread quickly through the construction industry and the broader community where they had lived. Potential employers who might have given him a chance before now saw him as a man who beat his wife, someone too dangerous and unstable to trust with important projects. Friends and acquaintances avoided him on the street, and even some of his own family members expressed doubt about his innocence. Joseph, however, remained steadfastly loyal to his friend. He had known Desmond for years and had never seen him show even a moment of violence or aggression toward anyone, let alone toward Gloria. Joseph opened his own small apartment to Desmond, giving him a place to sleep and recover from his injuries while he figured out how to rebuild his shattered life. More importantly, Joseph provided emotional support and encouragement during the darkest period of Desmond's life, reminding him that one person's lies could not define his true character. But even with Joseph's support, the months following the divorce were the most difficult of Desmond's life. He fell into a deep depression that made it hard to get out of bed each morning, let alone pursue new business opportunities or job prospects. The combination of physical pain from his injuries, emotional devastation from Gloria's betrayal, and social isolation from the damage to his reputation created a burden that sometimes seemed impossible to bear. There were days when Desmond seriously considered giving up entirely, when the weight of his circumstances made him question whether life was worth continuing. He would sit in Joseph's small apartment, staring at the walls and wondering if perhaps Gloria had been right all along, if perhaps he really was just a dreamer with no real ability to succeed in the practical world. But somewhere deep inside him, beneath all the pain and doubt and despair, the spark that had always driven Desmond to pursue his dreams continued to flicker. It was barely visible, like a candle flame in a strong wind, but it refused to be completely extinguished. Gradually, with Joseph's constant encouragement and his own stubborn determination, Desmond began to climb out of the pit that Gloria's betrayal had thrown him into. He started small, taking whatever construction work he could find, even jobs that paid very little and offered no recognition or advancement opportunities. He worked longer hours than anyone else, arrived earlier, stayed later, and never complained about the conditions or the treatment he received from supervisors and clients. Slowly, his reputation for reliability and quality work began to spread among people who cared more about results than gossip. Word of his skills, reached a small engineering firm that specialized in infrastructure projects for rural communities. The owner, an older man named Engineer Adebayo who had built his own company from nothing, was impressed by Desmond's technical knowledge and work ethic. More importantly, he was the kind of person who judged others by their actions rather than their reputations, and he could see that Desmond was a man of integrity despite whatever personal problems he might have faced. Engineer Adebayo gave Desmond his first real opportunity since the divorce, hiring him to oversee the construction of a water treatment facility in a small village outside Lagos. It was not a glamorous project, and the pay was modest, but it was a chance for Desmond to prove himself and demonstrate his capabilities on a significant engineering challenge. Desmond threw himself into the project with an intensity that amazed even his new employer. He worked 16-hour days, solved complex technical problems with creative solutions, and managed the construction team with a combination of expertise and compassion that earned their respect and loyalty. The project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, and the quality of the work exceeded everyone's expectations. More importantly, the water treatment facility transformed the lives of the villagers who had been struggling with contaminated water sources for decades. Children who had been chronically ill from waterborne diseases began to thrive. Women who had spent hours each day walking to distant wells to collect clean water could now focus on other activities. Small businesses that had been impossible due to water scarcity began to flourish. The success of the water treatment project led to other opportunities. Engineer Adebayo recommended Desmond to colleagues and associates, and slowly but steadily, his reputation began to recover and grow. He began to win contracts for increasingly complex and prestigious projects, each success building on the previous one to create momentum that carried him forward. As his professional life improved, Desmond's personal confidence and sense of self-worth began to return as well. He realized that Gloria's cruel words and false accusations had been weapons designed to destroy him, not accurate assessments of his character or abilities. He began to see that her betrayal, while devastating, had also freed him from a relationship that was slowly poisoning his spirit and limiting his potential. Years passed, and Desmond's engineering company grew from a one-man operation to a respected firm with dozens of employees and millions of dollars in annual contracts. He became known throughout the industry as someone who could handle the most challenging projects while maintaining the highest standards of quality and integrity. His designs were featured in architectural magazines, and his company won awards for innovation and excellence. But Desmond never forgot the lessons of his darkest days. He made it a point to hire and mentor young engineers from humble backgrounds, giving them the opportunities that others had denied him. He treated all his employees with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or social status, and he never looked down on anyone based on their current circumstances, knowing from personal experience how quickly fortunes could change. Meanwhile, Gloria's life had taken a very different trajectory. Her father, Chief Okafor, had never fully recovered from the stress and embarrassment of his daughter's scandalous marriage and divorce. The family's reputation had been damaged by the public drama, and several important business relationships had been strained. More seriously, the chief had made a series of poor business decisions in his later years, expanding too quickly and taking on too much debt during a period of economic uncertainty. When Chief Okafor died suddenly of a heart attack, Gloria discovered that her father's empire was built on a foundation of borrowed money and unsustainable business practices. The company that had once seemed so powerful and permanent was actually drowning in debt, with creditors demanding immediate payment of loans that totaled more than the value of all the company's assets combined. Within months of her father's death, Gloria found herself facing complete financial ruin. The family mansion had to be sold to pay creditors. The luxury cars were repossessed. The company that had been her inheritance was scheduled to be auctioned off to the highest bidder to satisfy outstanding debts. Gloria, who had never worked a day in her life or developed any marketable skills, faced the terrifying prospect of genuine poverty for the first time in her existence. On the day of the auction, potential buyers gathered in the conference room of a downtown hotel to bid on the assets of Okafor Construction Limited. Gloria sat in the back of the room, watching strangers prepare to divide up the remains of her father's life's work. She felt hollow and defeated, wondering how her life had gone so wrong and whether she would ever recover from the disasters that had befallen her. Just as the auction was about to begin, a late arrival caused a stir in the room. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit entered and took a seat near the front. Several people seemed to recognize him and began whispering among themselves. Gloria looked more closely and felt her heart stop. It was Desmond. He was completely transformed from the broken man she had destroyed years earlier. His clothes were tailored and elegant. His bearing was confident and successful. His face, which had once been marked by desperation and defeat, now showed the calm assurance of someone who had achieved his dreams through hard work and perseverance. This was not the struggling laborer she had married and betrayed. This was Desmond Okaro, CEO of Okaro Engineering Solutions, one of the most successful construction companies in West Africa. When the bidding began, Desmond participated with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and had the resources to obtain it. He outbid every other interested party, purchasing the entire company for a price that would cover all debts and leave a small surplus for Gloria. When the auction ended, he owned everything that had once belonged to her father. Gloria approached him after the sale was completed, her hands shaking and her voice barely above a whisper. She asked him why he had bought the company, whether it was revenge for what she had done to him. She expected anger, accusations, or at least some acknowledgement of how badly she had treated him. But Desmond's response surprised her completely. He explained that he had bought the company not out of revenge, but because he saw an opportunity to save a failing business and protect the jobs of hundreds of employees who were not responsible for the company's problems. He said that he had no interest in punishing her or making her suffer further, that he had long ago forgiven her for her actions and moved on with his life. He told her that success and happiness had taught him that holding on to anger and resentment was like carrying poison in your heart, harmful to yourself more than to anyone else. He explained that he had learned to be grateful even for the painful experiences in his life, because they had taught him valuable lessons about resilience, character, and the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. As Gloria listened to his words, she began to understand the magnitude of what she had lost when she betrayed and destroyed her marriage to this remarkable man. She realized that in her impatience and cruelty, she had thrown away something more valuable than all her father's wealth. She had lost a man who possessed the rare combination of talent, integrity, and compassion that no amount of money could buy. The story of Desmond and Gloria serves as a powerful reminder that we should never judge people based on their current financial situation or social status. Life is unpredictable, and circumstances can change dramatically in ways we never expect. The person you look down on today, because of their humble circumstances, might be the person you need to ask for help tomorrow. The individual you dismiss because they lack money or connections might become the leader of an industry or the employer who controls your future. More than that, this story teaches us that true character is revealed not in moments of comfort and success, but in how we respond to adversity and treat others when we have nothing to gain from being kind. Desmond's ultimate triumph was not just in his business success, but in his ability to maintain his integrity and compassion despite the cruelty he had experienced. Subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.